Welcome to Medical Education Update. I'm Teresa Sörö. I'm working for the Center for Learning and Knowledge. We have the Congress approaching now, and I have one of the keynote speakers with me, Dr. Mehta. Welcome.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
Yes, and you are Associate Dean at the Cleveland Clinic. Could you please elaborate more about that?
Sure. I'm an Assistant Dean, hopefully Associate at some point. So Assistant Dean, I take care of Education, Informatics, and Technology at the Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine, which is a program of the Case Western Reserve University.
So how come you became interested in education?
That's a great question. I think it's partly in my genes. My grandmother was a teacher, and she raised her entire family, 4 kids. She was a single mother. And back then in India, this was a big deal. So somewhere along the line, I had so much respect for what she did that I always thought educators, I placed them on a very high pedestal. And then as I started going through medical school, I felt it was such a privilege to be in any way a role model or some way to influence the future healthcare providers. So back in 1995, I could have done a fellowship. I'd just finished my residency, and I had a choice to do a fellowship in some field of medicine, or I do a fellowship in medical education, and I chose that. And ever since then, I've been very closely involved with education.
And no regret?
Oh, I would do it all over again. Maybe start that fork in the road a little sooner than 1995.
Yeah. So you have some thoughts about active learning as well. Could you please share?
Yeah, so as I spend more time doing this, and you read about what people have thought all along, you go back all the way to in America, John Dewey, and learning by doing is such a simple phrase, but you don't understand what that means till you actually start working with faculty and what their thoughts are. So I very, very deeply believe in the constructivist approach that learners have to create their own knowledge. There is no way that you can just force it into their heads, right? And
so we're not giving knowledge to someone?
Yeah, I think as educators, and we are all learners too, but I think we are all constructing knowledge and helping others construct knowledge. That's kind of what I think about as far as active learning goes.
So putting that into the online context, because you have been really involved with the online learning, so what would active learning look like in the online context?
Yeah, so I think that's a huge challenge, right? Every time new technology comes along, we think the school is dead, the university is dead. So when the printing press was started, before then, people went to a school or a university because there were no books, and books were so expensive, they were handwritten manuscripts. And so you went to a university to listen to someone read the book, right? And then as soon as the printing press came along, people said, oh my gosh, the schools are dead. Well, there were actually more schools after that and more universities. So when you talk about technology, I think initially what happened is a little bit like what happened when the World Wide Web first started. Initially, it was very difficult for an average user of the internet to create content. So big institutions, you look at newspapers, magazines, they had giant websites. And people were just consuming the content, which is exactly what was happening in the lecture halls before then. And educators and institutions said, oh, this is great technology. So they invented the learning management system. And again, it was an institutional-centered learning model where there were videos, there was chapters, and a couple quizzes. You checked the box and said, this is done, move on to the next.
So you gathered a lot of information in the learning management systems.
Yeah. And you try to manage learning, which doesn't, by itself is an oxymoron. I think you cannot manage learning, right? You can create the environment where people learn, but you can't manage that. So then Web 2.0 came along, and this is really what active learning in the online space should look like. Because if you think of Web 2.0, everyone's making content. People are writing blogs. people are communicating in communities. Some of it is Facebook or Twitter, but there are other online discussion groups. So again, you're taking a model of like a community of practice and putting it online, and people could theoretically learn together, which is kind of what active learning in the online space should look like. But we can talk more about that.
So if you would give some tips for an educator that are used to the classroom experience and maybe working with active learning in the classroom, but taking that steps into the learning management system, and how would we do that and still facilitate learning for the students?
Yeah, and I think that's a huge challenge. So there was a model, it's called the TPAC model, the technology, pedagogy, and content, and knowledge of all three domains. And people feel like, or at least according to the model, most educators know the content they are teaching, right? So they have the content. And then there's the pedagogy. And, some professions include how to teach as a part of the profession, and others, just because you become a MD or MBBS or a PhD, you're assumed you know how to teach. So the pedagogy is sometimes assumed. But a lot of faculty, hopefully over time, they're smart people. If they've been teaching for a while, they start figuring out what works in the non-technical setting. And then you throw in technology, and that's the third domain. And I think there is a bit of a myth that I would love to correct, that most technology, the word technology scares people. They feel threatened. They feel like their students know more about using it than they themselves do. And or they feel like it is so much work, and they've already invested so much time in figuring out how to teach in the live setting that they often are threatened or afraid or don't have resistance to adopting technology. And what I would want to leave them with is the message that they have to remember what active learning is.
Yeah.
It means students have to do some work and think about what they're doing. And when they do that, they learn, which means the students have to do the work. And technology actually makes it a lot simpler to assign tasks to the students and let them do the work and see what they're doing.
So what you're saying is that the educator doesn't mean to be the technology wizard in this, because the students are actually going to use it.
Absolutely.
Is that?
Yeah, exactly. You captured it better than my 20-minute sentence. But, so you could imagine, it's as simple as, say, you're teaching Spanish, right? You as an educator could say, I'll just make something up, here is English song. Translate it to Spanish and record it. Now, they will record it and post it on some online space. All you have to do is listen to them, right? Who's doing the work?
Yeah.
How much time did it take the educator to assign this task? And the students know how to do this. They are already uploading content to YouTube. For them, it's very simple. They all have a smartphone where they can record themselves. So, I'll give an example of something I did with my medical student. She needed to learn hypertension management. And she was going to be with me for 12 weeks. And we were going to cover a lot of chronic diseases because I'm an internist. So I said, let's figure out how I get you to understand how to teach about hypertension, how to learn about hypertension, and how to pick the right medication for the right case. So the average person would basically say, I'll have to record a big, long video and post it online, and it won't come out good, and I'll have to edit it, and I won't have space on my card, and et cetera, et cetera. And they would get so threatened they won't do it.
Yeah.
I said, here's a document. I made an online document on Google. I just created an empty table and said, you populate this table with the names of the medicines that you treat hypertension with and the characteristics of the medicine. And when you filled out the table, we'll talk about some cases and you tell me which one would work. And it worked.
Yeah.
So
you didn't need to, as an educator, cover it all.
Yep.
Yeah. Good. Great. Any last words?
Yeah, I think educators really need to think about active learning as students doing the work. There is a concept of desirable levels of difficulty. There's a paper by Bjork and Bjork. And remember, if it's you do all the work, if you, the educator, are doing all the work, you're making it so easy, it's not difficult. And when learning is too easy, it doesn't stick.
Thank you. Thank you,
Welcome.
Neil.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for listening, and stay tuned. Bye-bye.
See you.